economics. Subsequent weeks we'll be having microeconomics, the global economy, then the exam style test series. As I said, we focus on the specifics like how to exactly score in the IBDP exams, because getting the marks is not just about the concept clarity, it's also about how you write the paper in the IB, and that's crucially important. And for anybody to assess and evaluate themselves, between the input and the output, the only difference is practice and consistency. So we here bring you the IB exam style test series with exact questions that are going to that were appearing for the last 5 years or so, and how they're going to change in the subsequent years. The practice of the same to get the best output for your DP results. And April 5 to April 14, we'll only have the HL specific portions covered. And this all can be, the details for all of this can be discussed with me. I am just sharing my number in the chat in case anybody needs any evaluation in terms of the same, like if you need a diagnostic test also where you stand, or in case you need a demo session before deciding any further, you can connect on this number anytime. And I'll share the details with you in the DM. For the webinar, we'll keep it very, very specific. We'll have a discussion over various topics, because for the webinar, we usually see that it's very monotonous and many students do not get what they're looking for. So we'll keep it very interactive this time so that, each of you will be given a chance to actually evaluate or speak to Ms. Ruchi directly about their concerns, and that can be addressed in the webinar. I would request Ms. Ruchi to please take this up from here. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining. So today's webinar, we are going to deal with how to attempt long responses questions in economics. Okay, so I'm just going to share a document with you. Yeah. So now the session will be all about long response questions. And when you know the paper, when you know the content and everything, still students are not able to secure good marks, right? So what's the reason behind that? What are the things which we can look into consideration, which is going to help to increase our marks, is what we are going to discuss. Okay. And I request you to please be interactive in this session, because if I don't know how much you know, this webinar cannot actually work in your favor. So please answer the questions and we can then go ahead with it. Okay. So first question is, when you are doing paper one in economics, right? How do you select which question to do? So in paper one, you get choices of 3 sets of questions, right? So how do you decide which question you should be taking? Option 1, 2, 3, right? How do you decide that? You can unmute yourself and answer. You can raise your hand, whatever it is. So how do you decide which question to take for paper one? Anybody? We have seen an answer. I pick the one I'm most comfortable and have the most theory and real world examples on. Okay, do we have any other response? So let me just tell you an example. See, there is a 10 marker question. You're absolutely sure about it. Okay, this question, maybe I've done previously also. If I do this question, I'm going to secure very good marks. And similarly, there is a B part where you're not sure about the real life example. Would you choose that question? Would you choose a set of question for which you don't know real life example, or let's say you're not sure of the real life example? No. Yes, that's the ideal choice. Basically, when you have to make a choice which set of question you should do, you should actually select the question based on the part B. So if you are very comfortable with the part B of a question, if you are very, very sure of the real world example, please pick that set of question, because economic theory, mostly there is a chance, because some students do selective study in economics. Never do selective study. Don't always think we will only do micro and macro, global we will leave, because the paper components, 3 paper components, are decided in a way that they are going to test you across the units. So please don't do selective study in economics, number one. Okay, so well said. Yes, we'll be selecting on the basis of question B. So here are some things to remember. So question A, part A, paper 1, usually talks about the analyze, distinguish, or explain. So this is going to be the major command words for the question A. And most of the questions, like you say, 99.99% of the questions that are asked, they do have diagrams. So never assume ki, do I have to draw a diagram? Yes, you have to draw a diagram, and your analysis should be based around your diagram all the time, right? So at least one diagram every question expects, and some questions might even have two diagrams. So for example, if you have a question on a tariff, so you want to evaluate the effects before and after tariff, then you might need to use two diagrams there, but at least one diagram is minimum that every question demands. Okay, so if you can see here, almost all answers will require at least one diagram and possibly two or even three diagrams in situations. So for example, if you have some question where they're talking about inflation, we're also talking about the relation between inflation and unemployment, then you might also have to use Philip curve. You might also have to maybe show it to the inflation diagram also. So two or three diagrams might also be required. Okay. Answer should be not repetitive. Sometimes students have this misconception that, okay, if it's a B mark question, if it's a 15 marker question, I should be writing 4 pages or I should be writing 5 pages. Never go with the quantity in economics. Don't assume that if I've written 3 pages or 4 pages, I'm going to get, good marks or better marks. It's not like that. It's not always quantity, it is quality. So if you're repeating the concepts that you're writing, you're just trying to say, same thing from different angles, like, it's coming in a repetitive manner. That's not how you get, better grades for paper one. Avoid writing. And okay, one question. Should we conclude whenever we are doing a long response answer? Should we conclude? Yes, anybody? Should we conclude? Yes. And what does conclusion means to you? Anybody? I would like a final judgment, but not a summary. Okay, very good. Asha, this is very well said. Most of the student assume that conclusion is just I'm going to summarize whatever I've written. There is no need for you to summarize. The examiner has already read what you have written. No, no new ideas in the conclusion is wrong, Rashi. You have to actually write new ideas in the conclusion. Conclusion is actually you're not summarizing what you have already written. Conclusion is you're going to give a different point of view. And actually, if you're not writing anything new in the conclusion, don't write conclusion. Right? So conclusion might be, for example, suppose you are justifying a policy. So let's say you're justifying some supply side policy. So you might say that this supply side policy is going to be effective in this case, provided we consider the magnitude, provided we consider these alternative policies which is working in together with this, and then we can achieve the desired result. Okay, so you have to conclude, but if your conclusion is just a summary, don't waste your time and words doing that. Okay. Now let's talk about B part. So what we are supposed to include in the B part. Okay, very interesting thing. I'm not sure if many students know about it. Let's say you have used a diagram in part A and you want to use the same diagram in part B. So can you give the reference or you have to draw it all together? So if you just give the reference, is it okay? You can refer to it in part B. Yes, So, for example, you have drawn one diagram, one full diagram, you have drawn and explained everything in part A, and you want to use the same diagram for part B. There is no need for you to draw it all together, but you have to write as in referred to a diagram in 1A or as referred to diagram 1 drawn in question 1A. So this reference you have to give. So if you have not given the reference, then you will not be awarded any marks for that. And can you refer the definitions also? So for example, if I have defined market failure in 1A, yes, you can also refer to definition in part B. So you can also say market failure as defined in 1A. That's absolutely fine. So when you are doing part B, anything which is new, any new definition you can write, but any definition that has already been written in part A need not to be written again. Okay? So always start answer B on a new page. Okay, so it's not something related to marks, but it's related to aesthetics. You should always start answer from a fresh page, right? Definition, theories, examples, whatever that has been given in part A should be referred to part B without repeating. So there is no need for you to repeat, as we just discussed. In the introduction, only the new terms which you have not described previously needs to be referred, or you can just define the new terms, right? Okay. One very important thing I wanted to ask about real world example. How many real world example you should be including in part B? How many real world example you should be including in part B? Anybody? Two, one. Okay. If we use two real world example, Rashi, you have written we should be using two. If we use two real world example, isn't it that we are analyzing and evaluating less because you have same amount of time? And if you are splitting your answer into two real life examples, do you think you're not ending up doing justice even to one? That's a basic notion. So some teachers says that only use one real life example and build your answer around it, right? Oh yeah, it might not be very detailed. Okay, okay, but the fine IB examiners says never ever a student got a 15 marks in B if the student has not include more than one real life example. So if you want to target that higher 14 or a 15 marks in B, you should be using two real life examples. So how would you justify my previous statement when I said that using two real life example means you will end up not analyzing and evaluating in detail either one? Okay. But if we are making two different points, mm, Hmm. Okay. So Arshia has said that, but if we are making two different points, like one on inequality and one on inflation, can we not use two different countries? Like, yes. So see, the idea is when the teachers restrict you to use two real life example, they are doing that because when you write two real life example, what usually students do, like she just mentioned, you will take a real life example, do a diagram, do a little analysis, and just leave it. Then you will pick a separate real life example, do a little analysis, and just leave it. So, like this, you end up not evaluating either one effectively. So, that's not a good idea. What should be a good idea? So, for example, I gave you the example of a supply side policy. Okay. Now, let's say the question is on supply side policy, and there are many policies under supply side policies. Correct? So if I take a real life example of any one thing and I'm using it, I'm analyzing it, and I'm evaluating it, and in order to support it, when I'm saying that instead of this, government can also do this, like how you suggest an alternative policy to in part B, right? So while suggesting an alternative policy, you can support the alternative policy with another real life example. So the second real life example that you're using should be a way of evaluating the first real life example that you've already placed. So both, like how you have mentioned, one of this the student has mentioned about one of inequality and other of inflation. So if you are using two real life example, the answer must be in a way that the answer is in terms of evaluation. And when you're using the second real life example, it should not look like it's out of the box. It should be integrated in the way. Okay, if yeah, so anyone has any questions regarding the real world examples or something, you can type in the chat or you can just unmute yourself and ask me. See, this is very clear that we are not saying that every time you should be using two real life examples. Sometimes using two real life examples can backfire you also if you don't know which two want to use. Okay, so if you are using them in integrating them nicely, if you are using in an evaluation. Yes, we do have a list of real life examples also. And real life examples, if you see your textbook, also have real life examples. And okay, because Rashi has asked this question, let me take your opinion. How do you remember real life examples? And how much accuracy do you think real life examples should have when you are incorporating it? Because 15 marker question can come on any topic, right? So if it's like a price floor, they cannot necessarily ask you a price floor. They can ask you any specific thing also, like they can ask you for an agriculture product also. So how do you make sure that you have that particular real life example which would actually be required for part B? So how do you learn real life example and how do you remember them? Yes, anybody? Okay. Hmm. Okay, so usually what happens when you're trying to say that we are going to, just going to, let's say, broadly remember that inflation happened in America, let's say, or recession happened in America in this year, and then you're trying to bluff around कि अच्छा इतना percent unemployment हुआ होगा, yeah, this must would have been the rate of inflation. So examiner would not give it like a wrong because every examiners, cross check the stats. So they are not just like you were कि examiners को कैसे याद होगा. They cross check the stats कि okay what the stat has written, and if they feel that the stats are not matching, then of course they will not give you to that higher band. So what's the idea of learning the real life example? So when you can do one thing, you can pick a country. So for example, you picked America, okay, and then you learn America stats of 2025. So for example, in 2025, the GDP was this much, the unemployment was this much, the inflation was this much. Now, if you learn 6, 7 facts about America, now you can use those facts for n number of questions that will be asked. Right. The same thing can also be used if the question related to growth is asked, if the question related to unemployment is asked, if the question related to the relation between unemployment and inflation is asked. So, multiple questions, if asked, you can use the same real life examples. So, rather than making up stats, it's advisable that you remember limited real life example, but you remember a real life example which has multiple use when it comes to question. Okay. All right. So real world examples must be included as we discussed. The example or examples, that's why, if you see they are writing example and in the bracket S. Example or examples. So examples are also, so you cannot say using two real life example is a bad idea because they are giving you permission, right? They are saying you can use example or examples. Okay. And it should not be mentioned only at the end. The analysis and the evaluation should be woven around the examples, and the examples can be used to a substantial the assertion. So basically, what students will just let's say if the question is on let's say if the question is on cost push inflation, the students are going to say, okay, this is the cost push inflation, this is the diagram of cost push inflation, and this is the analysis. So this is how cost push inflation happens. And they will say, like in America, this happened. No, this is not how you are supposed to do. You are supposed to define cost push inflation, then you're supposed to include your real life example. So real life example should be included as early as just after the definition of the terminology. And when you are defining the real life example and then you're drawing the diagram should also be drawn with the context of the real life example only. Clear? So that means if you have any statistical data, you can include that in the diagram itself. And the diagram should be from the perspective of US, that you have drawn this diagram for US cost push inflation. And then moving forward, any analysis that you are doing, any evaluation that you are doing, everything should be having the context of real life. So it's better to focus on one country. Yes, you can do that, but this is not the last resort, Rashi. So I'm not saying that you just study America and that's it. But if you study America, like this example I gave you, or any country, if you study and you have a multiple stats of that country, so you can anyways use that question, real life example in the multiple questions, right? So not just one country. The idea here is that one country will give you the real life example, which will be used in multiple questions. So rather than, learning everything, learn few things, but learn them nicely. What should be the steps to write the 15 marker? Yes, Yashvi. So that's what we were discussing. That first you should be writing the terminology. And if you feel that you have already defined the terminology in part A, then you refer few terminologies in part B. And then thereon you can define any new terminology that you feel, and then directly you introduce the real life example, that okay, this happened in America, and now let's analyze and evaluate what happened in America. So when you are analyzing and evaluating, you have to write everything from America's perspective only, right? So you will draw the diagram from America's perspective, you will do the application and analysis from America's perspective, and that's how it becomes, right? Mostly what students will do, how many of you know about the clasp approach? Do you know about the clasp approach of evaluation? It would be nice if you can either comment yes, As many as if you know, no. Okay. Karina doesn't know about class. Okay. So if you write no, it becomes good for me that I spend some time describing it. Okay. Okay, so many of the students have written that they don't know about the CLASP approach. So CLASP approach is like a shortcut to do evaluation. So some students ask, okay, how to evaluate? So if I ask you that you evaluate your 15 marker question, how are you going to evaluate? What does evaluation means to you? Anybody? If you can answer or you can unmute and answer, what does evaluation means to you? How do you evaluate an answer? Yeah. How do you evaluate an answer? What you should be writing for an evaluation. If you are doing a 15 marker, advantages, disadvantages, and judgments, okay. Effects on stakeholders, okay. Strengths and weaknesses, short term and long term effect, okay. So this is only the CLASP. Yeah. So CLASP is actually a short form where C stands for conclusion, L stands for long term, short term, A stands for assumptions, S stands for impacts on the stakeholders. Then we have priorities and we have pros and cons. So, all the things that you have written, we have made an acronym for that so that it becomes easy to remember. Yes, absolutely. What you guys have written, that's what the evaluation is, right? Now, multiple papers that I've seen, how the students are evaluating, how students are doing evaluation, they will write a paragraph at the end. They will say, okay, this is the impact on the stakeholder, this is the long term, short term, and this is my conclusion. Yeah, yeah, okay. So I'll just write it. I've just written in the chat. So it's conclusion, it's long term, short term, it's assumption, its impact on the stakeholders, pros and cons, and there is one thing which is known as priorities. So priorities, like, yeah, okay. So yeah, we'll come to that. So priorities basically means the concept of opportunity cost, right? So if the government has money and government can spend that money into defense also, or government can use that money to provide free education also, what government should do? Now you will say, okay, education is important. Some of you will say, no, defense is important. But let's say, given the current situation of the world, like how the world has entered 2026, if government decide as a priority to invest in defense, it's not a bad idea, right? So sometimes government also takes action depending upon the priorities. Okay, so clasp needs to be, it's not a fixed place ki clasp hai to humko we have to do at the end of the answer only. Clasp can be done as and when it comes into the question. So your question should be like, let's go back to the cost push inflation examples that we are doing. Yes, yes, we can. Yeah. So wherever there is an evaluation, you can use CLASP. You can also use it for your IAs also. You can use it for a 15 marker paper one. You can use it for the paper 2 15 marker. And you also can use it for, if you have HL here, HL students, you can also use for paper 3 10 marker. So wherever there is an evaluation needed, you can use the CLASP approach, right? And CLASP approach must be integrated throughout the answer. So it's not like that you have to just include it towards the end of the answer, okay? And many a time what students are doing, let's say you're writing about the minimum price. Like let's say the question is on minimum price, and you will say, okay, if there is a minimum price, that means at least this much price must be paid. So producers will be at loss, workers will be happy, consumers will be at loss, government will be at loss. So this is how you generalize. No, this is not a good evaluation. So, good evaluation takes place when you are relating it to the situation. Like in your case, the situation is the US example that you took. So, you are talking about not just producers, you're talking about the producers in US. That's how you make it more specific. Okay, you're not just talking about consumers, you're talking about US citizens, so US consumers you're talking about. So you have to make your analysis and evaluation everything specific to the real life example that you are using. And there has to be a chain of reasoning every time you're writing a 15 marker answer. Can anybody tell me what does chain of reasoning means to you? Chain of reasoning. What is chain of reasoning? How can you use chain of reasoning in the evaluation? Anyone? Because 15 marker question is the question where the student lose marks. Okay, you're not sure how to use chain of reasoning. How do you use chain of reasoning? Anybody? If I make a claim, say what effect it leads to. Yes, that's correct. So, for example, if government is offering subsidies to farmers, let's say, okay. Now, if you want to say the impacts on the stakeholders, you will say that farmers will be very in the benefit side because they are going to get the money and therefore they will produce more. And when they will produce more, there is going to be a lot of surplus, right? And if there is a surplus that needs to be purchased by the government, so government will be at loss. Now you end your statement here because you have explained the impact on stakeholders, so you stop your statement there. But effective evaluation means going beyond this statement. And how will you go beyond this statement? You will say now government has to invest the money, taxpayers money, into buying that surplus which has been created into the economy. And here taxpayers are at a negative side because nobody of you will explain taxpayer as a stakeholder, correct? So you will say taxpayers are now at a negative side because government has opportunity cost of every tax money that they spend. So if they are spending the money buying the surplus, that means they are not able to do other things which might be the priorities, which might be slightly more priority for the government at the moment, right? Okay, like low education, low skills, bad jobs, low wages, low consumption. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, so chain of reasoning has to be there. Even if when you are talking about the stakeholders, even if when you're talking about the advantages and disadvantages, you have to talk about the chain of reasoning. Okay. So now sometimes students they what do they write a paragraph? They write a paragraph where they're talking all about advantages. Then they will write a paragraph, they will talk all about disadvantages. You don't have to do this black and white. You have to make a gray area. So if you're talking about an advantage, you do a chain of reasoning how you can convert that advantage into something disadvantaged. So for example, we are talking about inflation. We say, okay, now inflation will happen into the economy, prices will rise, consumers will not purchase. At the same time, if there is an inflation, that means GDP is increasing, so economy is also growing. So you are writing advantages and disadvantages simultaneously. So that's how a good effective evaluation takes place. Okay. So here we see the next point. They're also saying that part B must also include an evaluation or a synthesis that we just discussed, and both sides of controversial issues should be addressed. So when they are using the word both sides, that's what I was trying to say, that there has to be a chain of reasoning. It should not looks like, that they have taken the advantages from a portion of the textbook and pasted it in the answer. It should not look like that. Every argument has a counter argument, and every loss is counterbalanced by a gain. That's exactly what I said. Okay. Every policy has benefits and problems or limitations. And then you can also suggest. For most questions, there is no single right answer. Any opinion is valid provided that it is substantiated by analysis or a real world example. If you guys have seen the MS of IB, they never give a detailed answer for a long response, right? Never. Paper one you take, paper two you take, or you take paper three. For long response, they will never give a straight single answer because there is not one right answer. It's the way you write it, right? So, for example, some students will be writing inflation is bad, and some student can also write inflation is good. So it doesn't mean ki one of them is wrong. Both can be right also. Correct. It depends how you have substantiated your answer with the real life example and how you have supported it with the evaluation and analysis. Okay. Okay, I'll take a question. Is the Oxford book good to study from? Yeah, you can use like mostly students are using Cambridge. You can use Cambridge or Oxford, any book it's fine. The main thing is that you have to spend some time building this, what we say, counterbalancing a loss with a gain kind of strategy so that you can get a better marks for evaluation. Okay. Reading further to this point, although a question might seem to require a final opinion, evaluate the effectiveness of the monetary policy, for example, it is acceptable to conclude that in this example, it is effective in some cases and ineffective to other. Okay. So many students feel that conclusion means you have to conclude, like you have to give a final say. There is no need. Always you should know a strategy to conclude, but to be diplomatic at the same time. Okay, to conclude and not to conclude at the same time. So for example, let's say the question is evaluate the effectiveness of the monetary policy. So when you're evaluating the effectiveness, that means at the end you are saying either the monetary policy is effective or you are saying the monetary policy is not effective. That should be the ideal conclusion, right? But here, what you should be doing, you should be saying monetary policy is effective as in the given real life example, because the country has used this, the magnitude was good and everything, you can say. But maybe in some situation it might not be a good idea, and here is how you can include the second real life example also if you want. So you are using two real life examples, in one where the monetary policy was actually effective in solving the problem, and in the second where it was not effective. So that's also you can do. Okay. A summative conclusion is important for part B. Most important points made may be provided here. So now you see what they are saying. They are saying the most important points made may be provided here. So it doesn't mean always that you have to conclude what you have written. You can also provide new insights in the conclusion also. Okay. Okay. Some relevant points we are going to just have a quick read. You should always take 5 minutes to plan your answer. Just when, as soon as you see your paper, just don't dig into writing answers. Because let's say if you have seen the word monetary policy and you have done a question on monetary policy, you will have that set of ki acha isme to I have to write this only. But economics is all about decoding what is asked in the question. Many a time student doesn't interpret the question well, and then the whole answer just go in vain. Because if you're not writing to the question, whatever you are writing, you're not going to get marks for that. So take your time, 5 minutes, read the question 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, and just try to have a blueprint of what you're going to write. Yeah. So in the 5 minute reading time, I would advise you first to read all the three set of answer 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. You don't think कि मेरा time waste हो रहा है. You are not. You are investing your time actually. So you read your answer 2 times, question 2 times, 3 times, and then finally choose a set that you have to do. And for that set, do a planning. Also do a planning. Okay, ki if I use this diagram in part A, I can also refer the same diagram in part B. It can save me time also. So do a little bit of planning there. Okay. Answer the question asked, focused on it, and not the question that you would like to have been asked. This most of the students are doing. So for example, if you have already, so let's say we have already discussed about this question, evaluate the effectiveness of the monetary policy. Let's say you have already did this question in your essay and you have done in the term exam also. So when you see monetary policy, you're like, acha yaar, ye to wahi question hai, I have to write on the similar lines only. So don't do like that. Even a word tweaked in the question can change the meaning of the question altogether also. Okay. Avoid irrelevance. If you think that's not what is asked, don't do it. Okay. So let's say if there is a question on supply side policy. So don't like कि okay दो types के policies होते हैं, monetary होते हैं, demand side होते हैं, supply side होते हैं. In demand side you have monetary, you have fiscal, then there is a supply. No need to give that history. No need to write so much which is not relevant to the question which is asked. Okay. Uh, as an introduction, you have to define briefly the economic terms, right? And avoid ambiguities. Don't write things like best. Best what? Better. Better than what? So you have to be very, very clear in what you are writing. Diagrams that you're drawing must be very large diagrams, dark pencil, so you should be drawing the diagram. Use your ruler for X's. See, the clean diagrams you draw, better it is. So I'm not saying ki marks will be deducted, but it's an overall impression also that matters. Right? Um, Anything that you're writing must be relevant basically. Start a new paragraph for each new point, and each separate argument or an explanation deserve its own paragraph. Keep sentences short. So it's not advisable that you write like maybe 10 points. You write only 5 points, but then those 5 points must be counterbalanced also. So the idea is not to write as many points as you know. The idea is to write maybe few points and analyze and evaluate those points in detail. Okay. Logical arguments or explanations should be constructed and nothing should be taken for granted. In other words, every point should be justified or explained. Again, talking about the same thing, anything which you think is irrelevant to the context of the question should not be written. Okay. Most statements should be qualified, like usually, probably, perhaps. Don't say ki, okay, this is what going to happen only. If India do this, this will happen. How do you know this will happen? Right? So you also should show some kind of reality. Ki it may happen and it might not happen, kind of thing. Hmm? Although the intelligent layperson should understand the writing, colloquial or emotive language should be avoided as far as possible. Students should be encouraged to write as though they are economists, okay? Not the journalists or politicians or advocates. So you remember normative and positive economics you study in chapter 1, right? So you should always try to write from the economist perspective. Not कि ऐसे कर देना चाहिए, education तो free कर देनी चाहिए. Not like this. You have to write from the economist perspective here. Okay. I'll take a question. How do I refer? Okay. So referring means here that let's say you have drawn a diagram in 1A and you want to use the same diagram in 1B. So you need not to draw that diagram again. You can just say as refer to the diagram 1, like if you have titled it as diagram 1, or as refer to the diagram drawn in part A. So you can give the answer reference and then continue with your analysis. Okay. Uh, Acronyms you should not be using. Now, students are creating their own acronyms. So, what students do, they'll make a diagram and then they will say, okay, P stands for price, D stands for demand. Don't do that, except for the stated abbreviations. Like for example, GDP, it's used everywhere as GDP. AD, it's used as an AD. So, don't create even P for prices. Something you should not do. Now, all these things matters when you know you are targeting that higher 14, 15 marks. Then these small things also matters. Okay. Avoid using bullet points. You know you're not writing in points at all. You are writing in the paragraphs, and for each new point, you create a new paragraph. And read the question again once the answer is written. Sometimes one line needs to be added to present a clear answer. That can be done. Okay, I'll take a question again. How should I title each diagram? Is there any particular format? So, title actually is not compulsory. It's okay if you don't put a title, but you can put a title like figure 1, diagram 1. You can refer. That is going to be helpful when you have to give the reference of the diagram in part B. So you can say as shown in the diagram 1. So you know, and also its idea. Let's say if you have to draw 3 diagrams. So two diagrams you have drawn in part A. So you write it figure 1 or diagram 1, figure 2 or diagram 2. Then in part B, if you are drawing a diagram, you should label it as 3. Do not label it as 1 because it's the same question in different parts. So the diagrams must also be labeled in the same way. Okay. Okay, so this was my set of advice on how to do paper 1. If you guys have any questions, you can just ask your questions either in the chat or you can unmute or also ask me question. Yeah. Yeah, any question, anybody? Any questions related to how to answer, maybe paper 1, or even if you have any questions with regard to paper 2 or 3, also you can ask. Okay, I'm assuming no questions then. Or maybe I explained so well that you already know everything.
Yeah, I mean, they may be typing. I think there are a few
Okay.
questions in chat.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, we'll take. Okay, is it a possible to share the list of real world examples for a reference? Yeah, it will be possible. We can do that. You can contact the academy for the same. For the structure, is it intro, definition, body, example, diagram, explanation, evaluate, repeat? So Ashri, it's like usually how this is what we do. So for example, intro is not required. Okay. So intro is when yeah, correct. So definition you will put and then you will explain diagram. Yeah, perfect. Perfect. You can Ashri, you can go with that structure. I find really difficult to analyze a diagram related to analysis. So, Yashvi, analyze basically, see, it's very important for you to understand the difference between application and analysis. Okay? So, let's say आपने एक diagram बनाया, I've drawn a diagram. And when you have drawn a diagram, you are saying that the supply shifted from S1 to S2. So when you're writing this, this is application. Application of the diagram, you're explaining the diagram in the written format. Now, what is analysis? Analysis is like, let's say you're talking about the tax. So you will say the supply shifted because tax adds to the cost of the producer. So when the cost increases, the producers are reluctant to supply because the law of supply is applicable. So if price become higher, producers are less interested and therefore supply moves upward. So this is analysis. So analysis is always backed by the economic theory. Okay. So application and analysis must go hand in hand whenever you're writing below the diagram. Okay. Yeah. Any more questions, anybody? So that's not how economics do. So you cannot do selective study in economics. So the question is, what are the some of the important topics from each unit? I would advise you don't do that because if you are an HL student specifically, you have 3 sets of paper, right? And paper one में तो students can do कि चलो हम लोग we'll not study global. So we'll study micro and macro. तो दोनों में से at least one question we will do. But it is going to backfire you like anything in paper 3. Because in paper 3, they can ask anything from anywhere and all the questions are compulsory also. So no important topics I would suggest. You should be studying everything. Um, Yes, yes. So, Ashya, when you're talking, do we need to talk about assumptions? Yes, assumption is one of the criteria of evaluation in CLASP, when I told you. Assumptions you can always include, but assumptions should not look like कि अच्छा because she want to include the assumptions, she have put the assumption anywhere. Assumptions should go naturally, like it should be blended in wherever you're using in the analysis. Yeah. There is no need for you to evaluate and analyze the assumption because assumption itself is an evaluation. So when you are saying, for example, I am saying ki like the example of tax I give. So I'm saying the government has implemented recent tax on cigarettes and therefore people are going to consume less, let's say. तो यहाँ पे I have assumed that consumer are rational. I have assumed that producers are profit maximizers. So assumption you have to just mention. There is no need for you to analyze or evaluate the assumption. Okay. So 4 marker questions in paper 2 are mostly diagram questions. Okay. So they will ask you explain with respect to cost push inflation. So 4 marks questions may it's always divided into 2 plus 2. So 2 marks is for the diagram and 2 marks is for the explanation. So diagrams में यहाँ पे see in this document I told you कि title is not necessary. लेकिन in the 4 mark question of paper 2 जहाँ पर भी 4 marks के या 2 marks के you have a diagram question. In that if you don't put a title your 1 mark can be deducted. So it should be well labeled, title of the diagram, labeling and everything should be well labeled. And then 2 marks you have to explain it. So 2 plus 2 is how it is.
Good evening, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Good evening.
I wanted to ask you a doubt related to my recent exam. So
Mm-hmm.
the thing is, the question was related to increase in the price of a particular product. It
Mm-hmm.
was due to taxation
Mm-hmm.
and how it is affecting the producer surplus and consumer surplus.
Mm-hmm.
So the situation in the particular paragraph was that firstly I showed the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, beside that diagram one, I drew another diagram where it was showing the particular situation which was in the paragraph where the consumer surplus is decreasing and producer surplus is also decreasing due to the taxation.
Correct.
And also to evaluate this particular thing, I
Hmm.
drew another third diagram to show
Hmm.
like how because the thing is that the bus drivers they were planning to implement more taxation on a particular organization, so which was going to decrease the consumer surplus again.
Hmm.
So is it okay that I go?
See, when you are saying the bus driver are implementing the tax, I am not sure if you're talking about a tax or you're talking about a surcharge. Number one, because if it is a tax, then government has to put the tax, okay? And in that situation, both the producers and the consumers are at loss. Like the cigarette example I gave you, okay? So अगर आप cigarette के ऊपर tax you are putting, so consumer has to pay more. Producer will also have to pay some portion of the tax, and government is gaining. But here you are saying that the taxi, whatever is the case, I'm not sure, but the taxi drivers were planning to put. So that means if they were planning to
Ma'am,
put,
I'm
huh?
sorry. The thing was they had another option to pay the tax. So the government they were planning to apply those taxes on these transportation organizations,
Hmm.
and they had one option to pay the tax, and another was something else. But I wanted to understand that I could analyze that the consumer surplus it was going to decrease.
Hmm.
Okay. But
Hmm.
and in the third diagram, I wanted to show that if the travel agency they choose to pay more tax, the
Hmm.
consumer surplus it's going to decrease more.
Hmm.
So the price is going to, I mean, the consumer surplus जो line है, it will shift towards the y-axis. It will shift more away from the x-axis.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
is it
Mhm.
okay? Is it okay if I draw all these diagrams in one particular horizontal line?
No, that's not a good idea. This is a 10 marker question, which how many mark question? How much marks?
It was 10 or 15 marker. I don't remember. It was paper one.
Paper one. See, the idea is like you should try to make multiple diagrams instead of trying to explain everything in one diagram, because when you're drawing, even if you're just drawing tax also, and tax may you want to show a change in consumer and producer surplus, it's going to be very very chaotic, a lot of lines in the diagrams. So the good idea would have been, like you said, you drew multiple diagrams, right? So that would have been idea. Again, since I don't really know the exact context of the question, my answering ability here is also limited, right? Okay, we'll take this question here. So in paper, okay, so I always get marks in diagram, but marker get cut explanation one. Yes, because whenever the question is, Yashvi, if they are asking explain through cost push inflation, how does GDP is impacted, let's say. So if you have done the diagram properly, you will get 2 marks. But instead of doing the diagram properly, let's say your explanation is wrong, so they can deduct 2 marks for that. Sorry, Yashi, we can't go through the structure of 10 and 15 marker again because we just finished the session. Maybe if any of your friend has joined, you can take updates from him or her. Yeah. Ah. Any more questions? Okay, then I'll hand over the mic to Ms. Radhika, and you can take it forward. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope there are no questions left and we have addressed all of you. So now to conclude, doing well in 10 and 15 marker questions, I think Ms. Ruchi has very well explained how to do this. And if you are using the right structure, the right diagrams, and you're clearly explaining and evaluating your answer, then scoring will become